some difficulties with panel printing. I have a lot of experience in panel printing. What I want to do is cover, here on a 365, as many mechanical steps that you should take to ensure that the roll is loaded properly, the roll is secured on the take-up properly, and all of your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted. There are more things to consider when sample printing versus just printing a poster or a banner, and the reason, or a panel printing, and the reason why is, with panel printing, you're going to be printing, say, 6 panels, which have to line up perfectly so that you can overlap them and the images line up, and then also you have to make sure that the color is the same from panel to panel because they're going to line up to one another. I'm going to discuss as much as I can think of that I do prior to a panel job, because panel jobs require more investment and they require more accuracy and fastidiousness about the process. If you follow this process and you take the time and invest the extra 15 minutes, I think you will find that your panel jobs will print successfully. What I'm trying to do in this video is to eliminate as many variables as possible. And with a panel job, there are a lot of variables. I'm going to cover many of them. There still may be others, but this is the core group that I recommend that you think about and, if possible, follow. The first thing, loading the material. Now, what I have loaded on here is a simple adhesive vinyl in Avery MPI 2611, which is a low-tack wall film. It is a very good choice for low-tack surfaces where you're going to have to remove it shortly. It's a shorter install. It's not as strong on the adhesive. If you notice here, I have cut what I call a smile into it. It is a simple curve so that you have an apex point. I do this sometimes because it makes loading the media a little easier. When you load it with the smile, it slides through perfectly. Sometimes when you have it all the way across the front, it can get kind of stuck or hung up. If you cut a smile into it, it fixes that almost immediately. Also, when you cut a smile like this, it's going to make it very easy if you want to attach it to the take-up roll so that you can do it with a single piece of tape from the apex point. It is difficult to attach it to the take-up roll while it's running if you do not have a smile cut into it. I always use 2-inch high-quality masking tape when I affix things to the take-up core. I do this in 3 places, in the middle first, and then on the edges if it's a straight line. However, if you're attaching to the take-up reel while it's moving, you'll want to put it right in the center, and I recommend using a 2-inch tape because you don't want that hinge to slide. What you want to be able to do is put it on the take-up while it's running, and if you try to do it on 2 edges, it's possible you'll get one on before the other, and you'll get one on just as the other side feeds the media, and they'll be torqued a little bit. So I do recommend, if you're going to put it on the roll while it's running, that you cut a smile. If I'm going to do a panel job, I do not recommend putting it on the core while it's running. You can do it, but here's the drawback. Normally, when you load a media like this, after you've loaded it, and I do manually load. If you want to use the auto load feature, but I find for me the manual load gives me better results. I have loaded this media onto the printer. I have a 100 set for the skew. When you have a choice to load, you can either reduce the tolerance or increase the tolerance for the skew. A lower number is going to reject it more and more. As it feeds it forward, it's got to be virtually perfect for the machine to say yes. If you have a higher number, it's going to give you more wiggle room. For me, this is less important as having the media travel perfectly to the take-up core. Down here, is what matters most to me when I'm doing a tile job. And I'll show you that in a second. But I've loaded this material. It does not have a take-up reel applied. When you load material on a 315, a 335, or a 365, the machine calibrates, the OMAS calibrates a step alignment automatically. Now the back of this material is nice and smooth, so the OMAS will be engaged and it will read this very well. If it were highly irregular, or gray-backed, or clear or something, the OMAS may have trouble reading it, in which case I recommend disabling the OMAS. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll get to that. With this loaded on, the calibration has been done. And it picked an internal number and then applied that to the servo motors. The OMAS, the optical advanced media sensor, determined what the ideal step alignment should be with no tension applied. That is, it does not have any attention from the take-up roll applied when it just calibrated this media. So if you tape it to the take-up roll while it's running, you are going to change the tension about a third of the way through the first panel that you're printing. That is, in my opinion, undesirable. When I print 6 panels, I want to apply exactly the same settings in temperature, in everything else, in tension, in the way the print head is controlled to every single panel, because the panels have to be identical. They have to be exactly the same length, exactly the same color, or they're not going to work right. If you're printing panel 1 and you're taping it on while it's running, that means that you have applied tension, and that will automatically shift the advanced media a little bit, because now you have tension on where earlier you didn't. Anytime I'm doing a panel job, I put it on the take-up reel first. And that leaves you one of 2 options. Option 1 is that you just eat the media, put it on the take-up, do the calibration, which happens automatically when you go in here and you choose Enable Take-up Reel. You'll see that it starts recalibrating. It's recalibrating because it has to reapply the evaluation of the OMAS with the tension on. And I always want every panel to have exactly the same tension applied. So I roll it out, I put it on the take-up. If for whatever reason your take-up reel, Enable Take-up Reel is grayed out, you can either restart the machine or reload it. Sometimes what I do instead is I just go to Settings, and then I go to Image Quality Maintenance, and then I go to Substrate Advanced Calibration, and there's a button there that says OMAS Calibration. You can initiate an OMAS calibration of the media at any time. And anytime I'm in doubt, I just go in there and say OMAS Calibrate. So usually what I do is I put it on the take-up reel, I hit Enable Take-up Reel, and then I go in there anyway and hit OMAS Calibration. That is kind of overdoing it, but I want to make sure that this printer is applying a calibration for the step alignment with the tension being activated. 2 other things about the tension. If you look at the back of this machine here, we have what are called counterweights or cantilevers. These were introduced about halfway through the life cycle of the Latex 360. Now this is a 365 and it comes with them. If you have a 360, you can still order them. They are free. They come now with all of the current printers. It is a weight that attaches on the back of the dancer bar that allows the dancer bar to have less tension, putting less force on it, so that when I do panel jobs, if the media will take it, I will take the counterweights, move them all the way to the back, which allows the dancer bar to have the least amount of tension as possible. When the dancer bar has less tension, less weight, it's putting less force on it, and then your optical advance is going to be a little different. Always make sure you have those counterweights. Make sure that your firmware is current. That's also key, because we have certain features that you're going to need with a current firmware. And then also make sure that you calibrate the OMAS with the counterweights where you're going to have them with the media actually on the core. So in this particular case, I probably would not use the smile. I would simply cut a straight line. I'm going to get my razor out and do it. I would cut a nice straight line, bring it down, and go from there. So substrate, I'm just going to move it, roll it forward, and then I would tape it on the take-up. I want you to see something here. When I roll this down, even though my skew was fairly tight, on the right-hand side here, it's kind of barely hanging up onto this spindle cap. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lift the take-up and I'm going to bounce this so that it lines up from the top straight down and does not get hung up on this spindle cap. Now, it actually looks pretty good, and on second thought, it's right where it's supposed to be. But if you load this and this media is catching on that spindle, that means that you are not traveling mechanically straight down to the take-up reel. It's off a little bit. And I want that line to go straight down onto the take-up core. Some things about the take-up cores. I have two medias here. This is a very widely used product called Phototex. Excellent. Certified media, use it all the time. One of the best peel and stick fabric textured medias on the market. This is called Sticky Stuff. It's by Aurora. It is a similar type of product. It's more of a canvas and it's a little heavier weight. This is thinner, this is thicker. They both are certified. If you look at the size of this, this is a hair over 54. It's like 54.1 is what the printer will read it as. If you took this core and put it on there, even though this is a 54-inch core, it's going to come up a little short. That's not good. One of the key things that I do when I do panel printing is I make sure that all of my cores are cut to either exactly the same or the bottom receiving core is just a shade larger. And by a shade, I mean if this is 54.1, I would like this to be 54.2 and no more. When I roll it down to line up from top and bottom, I want that take-up core to be exactly the same size, if not a hair larger than this one. I do not want to use any old size core and then have it potentially travel or telescope on this one out here. In a sense, I am locking down the trajectory of the media from the feed all the way down to the take-up so it is exactly perfectly aligned and it has no place to go. It is straight down and it has, I give it a hair on wiggle room. I mean, just a hair. And I will lift this lever and adjust it until it's perfect. And then I roll it down, form a loop onto the take-up, and then I install the dancer bar, then I hit enable take-up reel, and then it will recalibrate with the tension of whatever you chose with the cantilevers or the counterweights either forward or backward. Make sure that your counterweights are exactly the same distance from one another. You know, it's a screw that you have back there. And so if you bring them in halfway, I tend to either bring them all the way in or all the way out. But if you want to bring them into intermediary stages, I would put like a little mark with a little white marker or something, or measure exactly so that you have them at exactly the same forward or backward distance. You don't want to have one a little forward from the other because that could create a little torque on your dancer bar. With both of these, I have the cantilever counterweights all the way back. I want to put just as much pressure as I need to have it take up the roll and then drop down and then feed it onto the take-up. If for whatever reason you need more pressure on it, this sticky stuff by Aurora was thicker, and so it really probably could have used a little more weight on the dancer bar to be effective. The Phototex really doesn't. Most adhesive vinyls, you can bring the weights back. but every material is going to be different. That's why we have adjustable weights going on the front and back of the counterweights. So once you have your counterweight set, then you enable the OMOS to recalibrate the media. If the media cannot be properly calibrated by the OMOS, sometimes a highly textured media, like certain types of waffle-backed wall coverings, you may be better off if you simply turn the OMOS off, and when you turn the OMOS off, you turn it off in the advanced panel here for the media. So you go into the media and you actually turn it off. You open the media up. In this case, it is the Aurora Textile Sticky Stuff Tiling. I would hit Modify if that's what this was, if that were on. And then I would open it up, click to Advanced tab, roll it up, and you see a thing that says OMOS Enabled. Turn it off. After you turn it off, you still have to step alignment. You have to do a manual step alignment. Manual step alignment with it on the take-up reel. You're going to go back to the home screen. You're going to go to Settings, Image Quality Maintenance, Substrate Advanced Calibration, Print Adjustment Plot. That print adjustment plot is going to give you a chart. It has dark lines going to white, and you're going to choose where it's the lightest line. So let's say that is -2. That's a common one I see. If it had no take-up applied, depending on where you put the counterweights, no take-up, it would be 0 if you were to print the chart. But if you were to apply a take-up, you might see that it would go to -2. The weight is applying a slight pressure, and the step alignment is calibrating for having that pressure applied. That's what it's doing. So you get the number, and then you put the number into here, into the settings for the advanced tab. We have a process that describes that. But you only do that if you have an irregular surface or you don't trust the back of it. Sometimes with waffle-backed media, I just turn the OMOS off just because I don't know how accurate it's going to read something that has such a textured back surface. Now, I mentioned the cores, getting the right length. That's key. I will take this 60.5-inch core and cut it down before I'm going to use a core like this, which is clearly a little bit too short. I don't want a short core. That's not going to work right. Think about it. It's going to travel down to the take-up, and it's going to get kind of stuck on the edge of the end cap because the core isn't long enough. Or people throw any old size core as long as it's bigger. Here's the trouble. First, I recommend leveling your machine. Put a level on it and make sure you're level. A lot of people have a printer that's actually not on level ground. Usually the way it works is if the machine's going to, if the paper or the wall covering is going to travel, it's going to travel that way. And so if you put a wide core on the end and it starts traveling that way, you'll come in later and you'll see that it has walked 1/4 inch on you. It walked 1/4 inch because maybe your printer's not level, maybe there's a little bit of vibration, and the natural tendency of the media is to walk that way. You put the three together, and then that's why you're off. That's why your panels don't line up, because you're not taking the precision to get a core that's either the exact size or just a hair larger, so that you're limiting where the media can go. It can't travel anywhere. And I also bring it down here and lift that lever up and make sure that when I tape it on, which is about now, I would tape it on and roll it a little bit farther out. I make sure that that thing is taped on and it is secure. And then I roll it forward and get everything ready. So I'm wasting a little media because once I send that panel job, there's no going back. I sent it. It's going to do 6 panels in a whole roll. I don't want to find out later that the whole job isn't lining up because I didn't invest the time beforehand. Some other things to be aware of. These end caps, if you look down here, it's probably hard for the camera to see. On this end down there, those end caps, especially if you pull them off a lot on the 360 and 365 series, if you pull those off a lot, that spring can get loose. And that will allow the core to actually slide this way and push the end cap. I have taken a little piece of tape in addition to the spring, and I kind of tuck it in there so that it forces the cap to stay in place. On a tile job, I do not want those end caps sliding that way. If they slide that way, the media is going to slide that way, and again, that's going to throw off your measurement. You want everything to be tight. No movement, no drift, no sliding. Also, when you cut your cores, if you do, I use one of these nice, very sharp Japanese pull saws. Okay? It cuts these things great, but even if I don't put it into a box to cut it straight, probably your best tool is going to be a fine blade on a radial arm saw straight down. You don't want to cut these things at an angle, because if you cut them and they're at an angle and it's sloppy, you're going to push it up against this end cap, and instead of laying flush against the end cap, it's going to be tilted on the end cap and it's going to wobble. I don't want wobbling panels. All my panels need to travel straight, so I need nice straight flush cut lines on the cores. That also matters. These little details on precision, when you add them all up, that's possibly the difference in a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch, and that's what allows the panels not to line up. So, cores, end caps, cutting the cores flush, putting it on the take-up. I eat the media. I just waste it. However, if you don't want to waste it, here's my recommendation. You have one of two choices. Choice one, you print the first panel by itself with the OMOS having registered whatever the registration is without the take-up reel. That is, you're going to print the first panel, no take-up reel. Then, when it's done, you're going to roll it backward, put it on the take-up reel, get it exactly the way you want, roll it forward, and then do the other, say, 5 panels. First panel, no take-up reel. Second one's take-up reel on, hit take-up reel enable recalibrates the media, now you send the other 5. The danger in that is you still have a variable. Panel 1 and panel 2 through 6 are different. They're just not exactly the same, and if panel 1 doesn't line up to the others, I understand why. The other option is to tape a leader. Here's the issue if you tape a leader. We are trying to get total maximum precision down to the take-up reel. So if you tape a leader to this, I recommend that your leader be exactly the same size, and I recommend that your leader be almost the same material, and you got to get it lined up so it is exactly perpendicular, parallel to the other media, because it's got to line up perfectly and travel down. Your leader has to be the surrogate for your media, and if it's not going to travel properly. What's going to happen is you're going to get to your actual media, and it's going to come on a little crooked, and you've defeated the purpose. If you feel that you can put a leader on and do it with precision, go ahead and use a leader. That will save you a bunch of media. Those are your options. Tape a leader, do it right, be precise, I don't have an issue. You can do the first panel with the OMOS, OMOS calibrated for no take-up reel, roll it back, put it on, and then run the rest of the job. Or you can waste the media. That's obviously inconvenient, but you're running a panel job, and panel jobs are a little different. Or you can tape it on while it's printing with a smile and hope that there isn't enough difference with or without the take-up reel. If you have those counterweights all the way back, that's going to give you a better chance. Because if you're taping it on while it's running, the counterweights all the way back are putting a very light pressure on it. But it's still different. With the dancer bar and no dancer bar, there's going to be a little bit of a difference in the halfway through the first panel. So that explains some of the basic mechanicals that you have to consider when doing a panel job. Next part. When I load the media, there is a feature on the 365, 335, 315, and it is called, so in this case, I'll do as an example, the Aurora Sticky Stuff. This is a certified media. After I've loaded everything on here, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to go to the substrate library, and in this case it landed in self-adhesive vinyl, and you see you have options: new self-adhesive vinyl and new self-adhesive vinyl optimized for tiling. That's what you want. If you are printing wall covering, if you are printing vehicle wraps, and this is mostly addressed to color consistency, but I use it for tiling jobs because most tiling jobs require color consistency. If you're doing a solid purple backdrop, 8 panels, you definitely want this on, because there are things you can do in the RIP, like flipping every other tile, putting spit bars on it, all that stuff. But the optimized for tiling mode was specifically developed by HP to take an existing preset, in this case the Aurora sticky stuff, and to convert it to a tiling mode, optimized for tiling, that dials in the tolerances on color even further. What we are trying to do is to ensure that when the print head gets instructions, those instructions are to run within such a narrow band of temperature, because we want to ensure that the color does not drift whatsoever from panel to panel. For me, when I'm doing a tile job, unless it's like a big colorful photographic type thing, I tend to optimize for tiling. The way you do that is you click New Adhesive Vinyl Optimized for Tiling, and then what it's going to do is it's going to ask you to choose from a media that's in that category which one do you want to optimize for tiling. Then you are going to color calibrate it, and then you are going to do an ICC profile on the printer. Both, not just color calibration. Normally when you download a preset, we ask you do a color calibration the minute you get it, so you establish a baseline. In this case, you're going to create a new mode. That mode is optimized for tiling, and then you're going to color calibrate and you're going to do an ICC profile. Both. So I have 2 modes on here for this media, and one is the Aurora Textiles sticky stuff and Aurora Textiles sticky stuff - tiling. That tiling mode is what I'm going to use for all tiling job wall covering, especially with solid colors. If it didn't have real requirements for solid colorness, it was more photographic, I'd probably skip that mode, because I have a little more of a tolerance to work with. That's what that's for. Now here's a heads up. This Phototex, which is an excellent product and is certified, it was created under the category of fabric. So it is under textile. That's where it lands. Well, if you look at textile, you'll see there is no optimized for tiling mode for textile. All you can do for this in the Phototex is you open it up, and then you can essentially turn on a long run consistency mode. I do recommend using that, especially if you're doing tiles, but that's not the same as optimized for tiling mode. So here's what I did. I took all of the data and information for this media that's listed under textile, the vacuum, cutter off, all the things that are listed in there, the optimizer, and I created a self-adhesive vinyl, and I named it, and I took all that information and put it in there, and then I created the media under self-adhesive vinyl as a duplicate with all the same settings that I had under textile, durable, under coated textile. And then once that was done, then I created a tiling mode for it that uses that as the baseline, if you understand what I mean. There's a couple settings in there, for example, a couple categories that do not have optimized for tiling as a feature of that category. This Phototex, I think, would have been better categorized as self-adhesive vinyl, which is what this sticky stuff was. I mean, it's sort of a textile-y face surface, but it really functions like a self-adhesive vinyl. And anytime I'm doing tiling, I want that mode. I want it available to me. And you'll see it primarily as self-adhesive vinyl. You may see it under banner, and you may see it under paper, especially because some wall coverings like non-wovens are categorized as paper. The two key things you look for with tiling that appear quite a bit is either self-adhesive vinyl, people doing vehicle wraps, or people doing wall coverings. Those are your two primary tiling necessary modes. Because you do a lot of tiling, those colors have to line up, and I do tend to use optimized color, optimized for tiling mode for those two categories primarily. Now, once I have everything on, once everything is lined up, my cores are perfectly cut. They're exactly the same size or just a hair larger. Sometimes I'll cut them like 0.1 inch larger, just a shade, enough to give it enough room so that it has a little wiggle on both sides, but not enough to go anywhere. Do not use anything bigger. Make sure that everything is cut flush. I do recommend putting it on the take-up roll before you run. It is not a bad idea to make sure your encoder strips are nice and clean. A dirty machine with a dirty encoder strip could obviously create some issues. You want to make sure all of that stuff is lined up perfectly. I do not have any more vacuum applied to the media than I need. I want a nice, smooth, easy travel across the platen. I don't want a heavy vacuum holding it down if I don't need it. Also, for example, in Onyx, if I'm sending my panel job, I send my panels as individual jobs. There is a feature in Onyx that is flip every other tile. That is only going to work if you send it as a single job. That is, you can't send each tile over individually and have flip every other tile. It's either or. I send my tiles as individual jobs. So I have job 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? That's because I want to be able to send them any way I want, and if something gets goofed up, I want it a very easy path to print that tile again. Okay, tile 5, somebody goofed it up, I got to reprint it. If I do that, that means I manually go to tile 2, rotate 180 degrees. Then I go to tile 4, rotate 180 degrees. I go to tile 6, rotate 180 degrees. The flip every other tile only works if you send it as a single job, in which case it breaks down the tiles on its own and flips them automatically. That is a key feature that people get wrong. Just something you need to know about. You have to manually flip the tiles if you send them over as individual jobs or individual files, which I do. So now I have rotated all my tiles every other one because you always want the tiles that line up to one another to be printed from the same side of the printer. This is less critical now that we have removed the heater in the print zone when we introduce the optimizer, but it is still a habit that is good that we recommend doing. It's still an insurance policy. Why not? I mean, it only takes a second to rotate them. I do recommend using a very light spit bar, at least on one of the sides. The purpose of that is if you're printing one big long solid color and it changes quickly, you want to make sure that everything is ready to roll because you've been printing CMYK the whole time through. You don't need much, you just need a little bit. That is kind of helpful when you're sending over tiling jobs. Those are the key things that I think will allow you to have success with tiling from a mostly mechanical point of view. If you get the mechanics right, you're eliminating the variables so that if something is wrong, it's much less likely to take place. The first thing I go over with a tiling job is, how are the mechanicals? Are they goofy? Do you have an end cap that's sliding off and the roll is walking to the left-hand side? Do you have a bunch of telescoping media going up on one side of a long core to the bottom? All of those things are indicators that I'd have to address that first before looking at anything else. So getting your mechanicals locked down is usually going to ensure a successful tiling job. Just some recommendations. I'm going to continue to make tiling focused videos because I think they're important. One other thing to always remember is when you download the preset, do the color calibration. And here's another thing I recommend. Before I do a color job, so let's say this material here, this Avery MPI 2611, let's say I built the preset for this today. I have now created a thumbprint. Its color calibration, its birthday is today. If I printed a big panel job right now, it's going to be exactly lined up to the color calibration I just did. Then I take the job and I cut it over there on the Zune, and I take all the panels and I ship them somewhere, and then 2 weeks later the installers install the job, and then panel 8, I get a call, panel 8 and panel 15 are damaged. It happens. Well, now I got to load the material back up again, but it's been 2.5 weeks. So the color has potentially changed a little. But since I did my color calibration the day of the print, that means that print was almost directly current to my color calibration. Like they happened at the same time. I have two choices. I can either print panel 8 and panel 15 as is right now, and I think they would probably be lining up. The other option, which I would probably do, is do a color calibration before I printed them, which is going to dial my printer in as close as possible to the day that I printed these, and then print those two panels. I might do it both ways just as an insurance policy. But ideally, you want to do a color calibration before you run a big panel job, because you want to dial that media in today, right now, and have no distance or no time elapse between the time you printed this job and the time you did the calibration. They happened at the same time. So to spend 15 minutes on the front end with the media, which is what I'm going to use a little bit on the waste to have it onto the take-up roll and justify it, because before I do a panel job, I hit color calibrate. I hit color calibrate because that tightens whatever time period has come along, lines up all your colors, puts you in perfect color equilibrium, and then 2.5 weeks later, when I have to go print that job again, I know that when I hit color calibrate, it's going to do exactly what it did the last time, line up your colors, and you're going to have a much greater chance of matching those panels that have been installed 2.5 weeks after you printed them. Doing a color calibration prior to a large panel job is good common sense. It is a practice that I recommend. It will save you from, because if I did this 2611 now, and then 2 months from now, I load it in there, I guarantee you that color calibration that I did today is no longer valid. And if you printed the whole panel job, and then 2 more weeks go by, and you try to print the panels and they don't line up, if you hit color calibrate, you are going back prior, way before you printed that job. So all that time from the original color calibration to the time you did it, that drift can't be overcome. It's lost because you didn't do a color calibration before a big panel job. I always do color calibration before a big panel job. Strongly recommended. It will definitely save you pulling out your hair when you have to match some kind of green panel that installs almost 3 weeks or a month after you printed it. Okay? Some good advice, some panel process, some methodology. Hopefully you get out in front of the panel issues and you don't have them, you don't see this video after you have some troubles with panel printing. And I apologize for being a little long, but I think this is an essential and core issue for us, and one that I want to help everybody resolve. Thank you very much for supporting HP Latex.